Ethan Thorne was a man who lived in the ether. His world was a realm of market fluctuations, billion-dollar acquisitions, and the abstract language of code and finance. At 35, he was the CEO of Thorne Innovations, a name synonymous with technological brilliance and a company whose headquarters, the 60-story Thorne Tower, pierced the city skyline like a glass and steel spear. From his penthouse office on the top floor, he could see the entire metropolis laid out like a glittering, intricate circuit board. He had everything a person could want. A fortune that was growing exponentially, a reputation that commanded respect, and a future that seemed limitless. Yet, every night, he was the loneliest man in the city. The loneliness wasn't a sudden onset. It was a slow, creeping vine that had wrapped itself around his life, growing thicker with every success. The higher he climbed, the more isolated he became. His relationships were transactional. His conversations were about business. And his home, a sprawling, minimalist apartment that was more of a showroom than a living space, was an echo chamber. There was no one to share his triumphs with, no one to confide in after a crushing defeat. So, every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights flickered to life, he found himself drawn to the one place in his building that felt truly alive. The lobby of Thorne Tower was a cathedral of glass and marble, a sanctuary of polished stone and hushed tones. During the day, it was a blur of hyperward executives, courier services, and important visitors. But at night, it transformed. It became quiet. The only sounds a low, ambient hum of the HVAC system and the distant, rhythmic clang of the city's heart. It was here that Ethan found his strange, new ritual. He would stay late, long after his tireless executive assistant, Sarah, had left, and sit in a large, comfortable leather armchair by the grand floor-to-ceiling windows. He would watch the city breathe, and, more importantly, he would watch her. She was the night cleaner, a woman whose name he didn't know. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent, efficient presence that moved through the lobby with a quiet grace. Her name was Elena Santos, a fact he would only learn much later. To him, she was simply the maid, a figure in a gray uniform with her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. A small, quiet woman with a profound sense of purpose. She never wore headphones or talked on the phone. She worked, and she worked with a diligence that fascinated him. Elena's world was a universe away from Ethan. It was a world of bus schedules, grocery lists, and the quiet, comforting weight of responsibility. She was a single mother, and every dollar she earned was for her son, Mateo. He was 7 years old, a boy with a laugh that could chase away any shadow and a mind as bright as the morning sun. Elena worked the graveyard shift because the pay was better, and it allowed her to be home in the mornings to get Mateo ready for school before collapsing into a few hours of sleep. Her job was her purpose, her sole focus. She was so engrossed in her work, the careful swipe of a microfiber cloth across a glass table, the rhythmic pass of the vacuum cleaner, the sorting of the day's discarded newspaper stat. The world around her became a blur. The faces of the executives who rushed out of the building were indistinct. The man in the leather armchair by the window was just a shadow, a fixture of the nightly landscape, as much a part of the building as the marble floor he sat on. Ethan's fascination with Elena became an obsession. He would try to get her attention, subtly at first. He would leave a magazine, a book, or a coffee cup on a table she was about to clean. A silent invitation for a moment of interaction. But she never noticed. She would simply pick up the item, wipe the table clean, and place the item back down with a precision that was almost jarring in its indifference. She wasn't being rude. She was simply being a professional. Her job was to clean, and that was all she saw. He escalated his attempts. One night, he accidentally dropped a large stack of papers, letting them scatter across the polished floor. He watched her approach, his heart beating a little faster. This, he thought, was the moment. She would have to talk to him. But she didn't. She simply pulled out a dustpan and a small brush, knelt down, and methodically swept every single paper into the pan, stacked them neatly, and placed them on the table next to him. She moved with an economy of motion that was breathtaking the entire time. She never looked at him, never acknowledged his presence. He was simply a messy obstacle in her nightly routine. He was a person in the ether, a shadow, just as she was to the rest of the world. Mr. Henderson, the 70-year-old doorman, a man who had seen generations of executives come and go, was the only one who noticed Ethan's strange new hobby. He would watch from his small station by the door, a faint, knowing smile on his face. One night, as Ethan was getting ready to leave, Mr. Henderson caught his eye. "A beautiful night, sir," the old doorman said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Quiet, peaceful." "It is," Ethan replied, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I find it the only time I can think clearly." "Some people," Mr. Henderson said, his gaze drifting over to Elena, who was now polishing the brass on the elevator doors, "don't have the luxury of quiet. They find their peace in the work itself. Their hands are so busy, their minds can be free." He offered a wise, knowing smile, a smile that told Ethan that he wasn't fooling anyone. Least of all, the man who saw everything. The observation was a quiet gut punch. Ethan realized his fascination with Elena wasn't about her. Not really. It was about her quiet sense of purpose. A purpose he was so desperately lacking. He had all the money, all the power, and all the success, but she had something he didn't. A reason. Every swipe of her cloth, every pass of her vacuum was for Mateo. His life, by comparison, felt empty. The climax of their non-relationship came on a night when the city was swallowed by a furious blizzard. The wind howled outside, a high-pitched shriek that rattled the windows of Thorn Tower. The city, usually a sleepless beast of light and noise, had been silenced under a thick blanket of snow. The building was a ghost ship, a silent, empty monument to a world that had temporarily stopped turning. Sarah, Ethan's executive assistant, had called him 10 times, begging him to leave before the roads became impassable. But he couldn't. His apartment felt like a prison. He needed to be in the lobby. Elena, too, was still at work. Her bus had been canceled, and the storm had trapped her. Her sister, who was watching Mateo, was calling her every 15 minutes. Elena's face, usually a mask of quiet determination, was now etched with a look of profound fear. She was scrubbing a stubborn stain from the marble floor, her movements jerky and frantic. She wasn't focused on the work anymore. She was focused on the clock, on the distance between her and her son. Ethan, for the first time, saw her not as a beautiful, silent object of his fascination, but as a person. He saw the terror in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she scrubbed the floor, the desperation in her posture. She was not a shadow. She was a woman, a mother, and she was trapped. He stood up from his leather armchair, a sudden, fierce sense of purpose flooding through him. He walked over to her, a move he had rehearsed 100 times in his mind, but never had the courage to make. She was so lost in her panic that she didn't hear him approach. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a low, gentle rumble. She flinched, startled, and finally looked up. Her eyes, a beautiful shade of brown, were wide with fear. She saw a tall, well-dressed man, a man she recognized as the shadow in the chair, but who was now speaking to her, his face filled with genuine concern. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice soft and full of fear. The bus! I need to get home to my son! He's with my sister, and she's expecting me. The roads are closed, Ethan said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. There are no taxis, no buses. You can't leave. Tears welled up in her eyes. I have to, she whispered, her voice cracking. He's all alone. I have to get to him. She stood up, her body trembling with a mixture of cold and fear. Ethan felt a sudden, profound shift in his own world. His billions, his power, his reputation, none of it mattered. In that moment, he He was just a man, and she was just a woman, and they were two people, alone in a storm. He felt a deep, powerful empathy for her. He realized that his selfish pursuit of a connection had been a foolish game. Now, he had a chance to make a real connection, a meaningful one. "I have a driver," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "He's in the basement. He has an SUV. He can take you. You'll be safe." Elena's eyes widened, her fear slowly replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "Sir, I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm offering. Wait here. I'll get him." He went to his private elevator, the one that led directly to his penthouse office, and descended to the basement. He found his driver, a stoic man named Frank, watching the news on his phone. "Frank," Ethan said, his voice filled with a new kind of authority, "I need you to take a woman home. She's stranded, and she has a son waiting for her. Take the SUV. Be careful." Frank, a man who had seen it all in his years of driving for the rich and powerful, simply nodded. He was used to strange requests, but this one felt different. It felt real. When Ethan returned to the lobby, Elena was waiting, her hands still trembling from the cold. He had a hot cup of tea and a spare coat, a ridiculously expensive one that he had bought for a business trip, but which he now offered to her. "Here," he said, his voice gentle. "It's cold out there, and this will help warm you up." She took the coat and the tea, her hands still shaking. She looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, she saw not a shadow, not a fixture of the lobby, but a kind man, a man with deep, troubled eyes, a man who was offering her warmth and safety. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you so much." He helped her put on the coat, and for a brief, fleeting moment, their hands touched. The connection, born not of a rehearsed gesture, but of a moment of shared humanity, was electric. "Your driver is here," he said, gesturing to the gleaming black SUV that had just pulled up. "He'll take you home. Go to your son." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief and gratitude. She got into the SUV, and as it drove away, Ethan stood at the window, watching her go. He was still the loneliest man in the city, but for the first time, he didn't feel so alone. The next day, the blizzard was over, and the world had returned to its chaotic routine. Ethan returned to his office, but he was a changed man. The quiet, empty feeling was still there, but now it was tinged with a new sense of purpose. He had seen the world of Elena, a world of responsibility and love, and it had changed him. He realized his pursuit of her had been selfish, an attempt to fill the emptiness in his own life. The real answer, he now understood, was to fill that emptiness himself. He had to be a better man, a kinder man, a man who could connect with others on a real human level. He began by making changes in his own company. He instituted a program to provide support for the building's staff, from better pay and benefits for the cleaners to educational opportunities for their children. He learned their names, their stories, their struggles. He became a man who not only commanded a company, but who cared for the people who made it run. Weeks turned into months. He still spent his nights in a lobby, but now he was not a shadow. He was a presence, a man who would smile and nod at the people who were working, a man who would offer a word of thanks to the security guard and the doorman. Elena, for her part, was changed too. The memory of the kind man in the lobby had stayed with her. She still worked tirelessly, still focused on her son, but her world was a little less blurry now. She would glance at the leather armchair in the lobby, and sometimes she would see him there, and she would offer a small, shy smile. She didn't expect anything from him. She simply carried the memory of his kindness as a small, warm ember in her heart. One evening, as she was getting ready to leave, Ethan was waiting by the door. He was no longer just the shadow. He was a person. "Elena," he said, his voice soft, "I wanted to thank you." She looked at him, confused. "Thank me," Sir, for what? For everything, he said, a genuine smile on his face. For showing me what it means to have a purpose. For showing me that there's more to life than what's on the top floor. She smiled, a shy, beautiful smile that reached her eyes. Thank you, sir, for the coat, for the ride, for everything. He nodded, and for a moment, they simply stood there, two people from different worlds, standing together, connected by a storm, a sun, and a moment of quiet, unexpected kindness. The story of their lives was not a grand romance, but a simple tale of two people who had found a connection in a world that had tried to keep them apart. He had finally seen her, and now she had finally seen him. The rest, he knew, was a story that was just beginning to be written.